Hey there, folks. Welcome to Spectrum Pulse. We talk about movies, music, art, and culture. And today we're going to be talking about the debut album from Lorde, titled Pure Heroine. About a year ago, a critic that I like made an interesting statement regarding the evolution of the pop charts. He commented that maybe due to the success of Call Me Maybe by Carly Rae Jepsen, the return of the boy bands, and the fact that Justin Bieber could claim to have actual hits, that indie rock would not be the music that would take over. Instead, the next few years would be dominated on the pop charts by what he deemed teeny bopper crap. Now, this statement in its own way was rather prophetic, as it did predict the chart rises of Selena Gomez, Demi Lovato, and Miley Cyrus to various degrees over the course of this year. But I wouldn't quite say that indie rock has been replaced either. On the contrary, I'd make the argument that considering the rise of digital music and the greater prominence of indie acts these days, the charts are now, well, I'd say somewhat split between acts moving towards more smart and mature material and those moving in the exact opposite direction, to mixed success on both ends. But could there be an act that potentially could rise up from the interaction of both of these worlds? Enter Lorde, a 16-year-old New Zealand singer who released her debut album titled Pure Heroine, and who has achieved a shocking amount of critical chart success with her first single, Royals. And look, while I have a very healthy amount of skepticism regarding the quality of teenage stars, Lorde has accumulated a certain degree of critical acclaim and praise for her razor-sharp lyrics and her claims to be inspired by Lana Del Rey and Kanye West. And while I was even more intrigued by the fact that she actually turned down Katy Perry, who wanted to recruit her as an opening act. So, what the hell, I picked up Pure Heroine and gave it a spin. What do I think? Well, I think we have another act that I could add to my list of those that I admire more than I really like. Make no mistake, Lorde's Pure Heroine is a good, possibly even great album, and I'm sure that plenty of her fans and target audience will adore it. But me, not so much. And to explain why, I'm going to try to take you through my thought patterns when I analyze this album, because I think it would probably be the best way for me to adequately articulate my reasoning behind my point of view. Otherwise, I really want to try to avoid any potential misunderstandings here. So, when I started looking through this album, I start with production and instrumentation. And really, that sort of analysis is fairly quick. It's great. Yeah, seriously, there's no superfluous effects. The reverb and echo were placed well enough in the songs to give them a lot of big, imposing presence. The heavy bass beats were allowed to gain swell and presence in the mix. The melodies are minimalist, but are driven well by the choral vocals and the harmony. Like, hell, you know what? This album is borderline a cappella with how minimalist the beats are, and with the spacious production, it's a great fit. On the instrumentation front, I did like a few moments that actual guitar showed up on the mix. It had an organic touch and it really blended well, particularly in the album closer, A World Alone. But on the flip side, there are a few electronic elements on, let's say on 40 Lux, which seemed to have this weird air horn sound that I really didn't like, and on White Teeth Teens that just kind of rubbed me the wrong way. Nothing all that major, but they did come up. But really, the instrumentation and production do a shockingly good job of crafting the atmosphere. An atmosphere that is bleak, dour, and impressively depressing. And unlike most modern hip-hop acts, it was very much part of the point, and it fits the tone very well. So, you know what? Points for Lorde there. And additional points must come for her vocal delivery. I'll admit right out of the gate that I'm not the biggest fan of her voice per se, but you know what? I do like her delivery. It has a lot of dignity and poise and charisma, and while I wouldn't quite say it shows vulnerability particularly well, especially considering a lot of the other female indie acts we've seen this year, it does match the tone that she's looking to cultivate on this album very well. Her delivery does show a lot of influence from Lana Del Rey. Expressive, often very pretty, but showing a certain reserve and poise and class that does somewhat detract from any raw emotions that she's attempting to show. And I'll admit, I respond a little bit better to just a raw, naked emotion. I will say that it's very effective for her lyrical content and matching that, but it did leave me in the end feeling a little bit distant, a little isolated from the emotions that she was trying to cultivate, which then again, I wouldn't be surprised if that was part of the point. So with all of that, I started to dig into the elements that are always my favorite to talk about: lyrics, content, and theme. Now, Lorde has already achieved some level of critical acclaim for her sharp songwriting and how polished it is for her age. And really, the critics who are making those statements are pretty much right on the money here. Lorde is a very good songwriter. I wouldn't say that she's amazing per se. There are a couple of great lines, but her lack of hooks on her material did cool on me a little bit. But she definitely defies the stereotype of the typical teenage girl songwriter, and it shows a lot of maturity and nuance and good framing for someone her age, which comes out in a big way in her choice of lyrical content. I'd argue in terms of songwriter, she's doing far better than most of the adult pop songwriters these days. So what is her content? Well, folks, Lorde's Pure Heroine is an anti-party album, one that has the potent goal of targeting vapid pop culture and skewering it viciously. It is an album that takes whatever is left of the club boom and takes it behind the woodshed to beat it with a jackhammer, showing how vapid, self-destructive, and ultimately hollow all of that material is. It's an album pointed at my generation and younger exclusively, trying to convince us to cut the crap and sober up to the hot mess so many of us have become. And well, let's make this absolutely clear. While I remain a sex-positive guy who likes to go out and drink and have a good time and party, I do understand and I do appreciate the cold slap in the face against the flagrant irresponsibility so many people my age and younger are showing these days with the overabuse of drugs and sex. It's a bold message to be putting forward, and Lorde's lyrics are sharp enough to make her point crystal clear. And what's all the more important, and what's all the more interesting, at least from my point of view, is that she frames the situation with a lot of nuance, often casting herself in the same light as the rest of her peers, which earns her the populism and gives her material fair amount of weight that her instrumentation supports beautifully. So, okay, the lyrics and the content worked for me, but why wasn't Pure Heroine just completely resonating and something that I could really fall in love with? So we had to go a little bit deeper here, and I posed myself a very simple question. Lorde is very good at pointing out the problems with cutting detail, but what is her solution? She says on her surprise hit Royals, "Let me be your ruler, let me live that fantasy." Okay, I can appreciate that conceit and that desire for alternative power besides the ways of wealth and popularity, something more based on principles, and I respect her intelligence and insight, but why would I gravitate towards her? What are those deeper principles, particularly when it feels like my deference to her might be driving her power fantasy and her search for power rather than anything deeper? What am I getting out of this? What's your bigger point, Lorde? What's your code? What do you say you're craving for some different kind of buzz? Hell, you stated on Team, my favorite song of the album, that you're hunting for the same sort of spiritual fulfillment that all the other shallower artists are looking for, but what is that buzz or deeper fulfillment that for which you're looking? Do you even know? Do you actually know what you want or how to properly get there? Do you have any goals in mind? What is the ultimate through line? What's your thesis? What's your plot? What's the ultimate? What was this all building up to? And really, we don't get an answer to those questions, and that becomes a problem because, like Vampire Weekend, Lorde is very good at describing situations and talking about them on a surface level, but the second that I look to go deeper, I find very little underneath. This, incidentally, is the same issue that everybody found with Lana Del Rey's album, Born to Die, her second album that took a very heavy critical pounding for being very, very pretty, but not really adding up to much in terms of substance. And really, Lorde's message is just further undercut by her human admittance that she does, on some level, like all that shallow partying and going out and having a blast and having a good time. In fact, she mentions it twice on this album, both on Glory and Gore and Still Sane. The latter track lamenting that she might become a part of the same toxic system and believe that she is the villain by perpetuating said system. You know what? The same sort of views that are put forward by her other influence, Kanye West. Hell, even Royals shows that she still has the same populist power fantasy as those shallow acts that she's criticizing. It's just framed in a darker, more depressing way, and while I do appreciate the admonition of humanity on the part of Lorde, it doesn't really strengthen the core of her message, all things considered. And to go a little further, I'm not entirely sure that her ultimate buzz, at least the way she describes it, is something that I'm all that drawn to. And that comes to an issue on this album with tone. Simply put, Pure Heroine is a dour, humorless, punishingly bleak listen, and while I can very much appreciate the artistry of it all, it's hard for me to gravitate towards this kind of music. There's little to no upbeat moments on this record, and while Buzzcut Season and A World Alone do a bit to articulate what Lorde's ultimate vision is, her solution, grounded in the normalcy of suburbia, just does nothing for me whatsoever. Maybe your point is that there's no way out. And by stating her observations of our generation's slide towards vapidity, it's given her some sort of a vestige of an escape, just to know that she's smarter and that she can predict the doom. Sort of like in a vein of sort of what George Carlin was doing back in the 90s. But in that case, if you're taking such a nihilistic approach and you don't believe there's hope for our generation, doesn't that mean that shallow happiness and enjoying the freak show, to quote George Carlin, didn't that make that all the more appealing, if only to serve as a distraction? I suspect that if Lorde had some sort of underlying thesis for Pure Heroine, I suspect it's along this line, and it's kind of lightly supported by A World Alone, which is a kiss-off track for all those who judge her in finding love in her own way. But I do suspect I'm reaching a little bit here with my judgments, and either way, even if I do believe that was her message, I don't think this album quite sticks the landing. So, in the end, Lorde's Pure Heroine just feels very hollow for me, both on an instrumental basis, which is positive, and in the lyrical content, which really isn't as positive. Now, keep in mind that for the most part, this album works, and I do relish in my gut the commentary that Lorde unleashes on this album. But at the same time, there's a lack of driving focus on this album that really did irk me, and the moments of subtext that added shades of nuance only seem to work to muddle things all the further for me. For me, look, it's a strong 7 out of 10, and I do recommend that you check it out because there are some great tracks on this album: Buzzcut Season, Team, and A World Alone. But as I said earlier, it's an album that I admire a lot more than I like. And look, I know that some of you will criticize me here for leveling some arguably pretty harsh criticisms against a teenage girl, but really, I'm being as harsh as I am because, well, I do see real potential on display from Lorde. She's a great songwriter, and I do like that she's willing to step up and speak the unpopular opinion, and particularly when she does it as compelling as she does, and particularly when it's directed directly at our generation. It has some insight to share. But if she wants to lead effectively, I think she needs to find that path in which to walk instead of just a downward spiral of self-aware negativity, because really, that can get old really fast. So yeah, thanks a lot for watching. I really appreciate all the views. As of this video, I'm coming close to 150 subscribers, and I'd like to thank all of you guys for being with me all this way. If you'd like to like and subscribe, I'd be more than grateful for that. Otherwise, if there's any other music albums that you would like me to take a look at, I'd be more than happy to take a look. Or if there's anything I might be able to do to improve my presentation here, I'm still working on getting that all up to speed. So until then, see you next time.